Agriculture on the move.
Agricole mouvement.
Agriculture on the move.
Agricole en mouvement.
Agriculture on the move.
Agricole mouvement.
Agriculture on the move.
Agricole en mouvement.
Hello again and welcome to the program Agriculture on the Move. I am Phillip Sydney. Today we are discussing the coconut industry. Once a very vibrant industry in Saint Lucia, but now, of course, as we are all aware, that industry is really no more. Of course, there's hope to resuscitate this industry. We know where we were in the 60s, 70s, and of course it brought a lot of profit into the farmer's pocket and of course to the economy at large. We have two gentlemen with us in the studio. We have Dr. Ranjit Singh, who is an agricultural economist who hails from Trinidad. We also have Dr. Simon Eden Green, who is an agronomist and also involved in plant health. Gentlemen, welcome to Saint Lucia.
Thank you.
And of course, welcome to the program Agriculture on the Move. Dr. Singh, can you give us an idea of your visit to Saint Lucia at this time?
Right. The background to our visit and our study was a needs assessment study that the EU funded for the Pacific coconut industry. Our ambassadors in Brussels, recognizing the potential of coconut today in terms of the oil having nutritional value, in terms of byproducts and value added, and having in regard to the history of the region in terms of being a vibrant coconut producing region, sought assistance from the European Union to fund a needs assessment study. So our work here is really to determine the needs for revitalizing the coconut industry.
As you are an agronomist and also involved in plant health, so far you have visited a number of places in Saint Lucia, a number of farms. What's your take on what you have seen so far?
Well, yes, indeed. We've had a very good and productive visit. We've seen an industry which, as you say, has seen better times, but we've also seen the seeds of revitalization. Quite a lot of growers are going into dwarf coconuts, and this seems to be one of the futures for your industry here. But there are obviously a lot of challenges, both with the dwarf types and with the traditional tall types, which have been suffering from a number of challenges, such as old age, the red palm mite, and of course the lack of the traditional market for copra.
So, Dr. Green, I know this initiative is not only for St. Lucia, it's for the Caribbean generally, as you mentioned. Since you have visited a number of farmers here in St. Lucia, what's your take? Do you think that industry can be resuscitated?
Yes, I think that that's certainly possible, and St. Lucia has the benefit actually of being relatively free of some of the major pest and disease threats in the Caribbean. I expect you're aware of the lethal yellowing problem in Jamaica and the out in the west. Well, that hasn't arrived here yet, although of course it's not so very far away. St. Lucia also benefits from absence of some of the key insect pests that are found in the southern part of the region. So there are many good things going for the industry here, I think.
Do you think, Dr. Singh, that from an economic standpoint, St. Lucia, with what you have seen so far, I'm sure you have had a sort of overview in your assessment, do you think we can really get back to the levels that we were some years ago?
I doubt you'd get back to the levels you had many years ago, because your industry was a relatively big industry. So things have changed. There's new dynamism within the economy, and while not everyone who was in coconut will go back in coconut, there are many who are in fact interested. I should also indicate that in the past this region has focused on the basic primary product, which is your oil. Today, however, the emphasis is not only on oil, but on other products, including the water and the value added. So one of our mandates is to look at the opportunities for value added products. And here in Saint Lucia, we met one processor who is into virgin coconut oil. We understand that there are many cottage scale processing of oil. Although your oil mill is closed, there are many cottage scale. I should indicate that one of the objectives of this project is rural development and poverty alleviation. And to the extent that you have small scale processors who could be assisted to produce a high quality oil, the income stays in the rural areas. So in many countries today, much of the oil that is produced by small scale processors.
Okay.
Like for example Jamaica or Suriname or Belize. In fact, in both Jamaica and Suriname, what we observe is that today the bulk of the coconut go into water market. 80% of production goes, and only a residual 20% is into oil. A similar situation exists for Jamaica. So the point then is that you may not get back to where you are, but if we provide the support and we facilitate the process, then it does have potential for impacting on the rural.
But do you think we can get our processing plant that was closed down right now in Soufrière? Do you think in your resuscitation plan that plant can get back on stream with the farmers coming back on stream with their production?
Well, that may be a challenge. I'll tell you why it may be a challenge. What we observe, for example, in the Soufrière area is that many of the trees are very aged. The tall varieties are very aged. So you have a problem there with trying to replace those with varieties, the tall varieties that are in fact better for oil. The question is whether you will need a scale of plant that size, because it's a huge plant. We saw it yesterday. Whether in fact you want to go with that technology or you want to go with a technology in terms of going the cold press method. Because your virgin coconut oil is in fact derived through cold press. You don't produce copra anymore. That's right. So I think that the business model may suggest that rather than go back with the traditional mill, you may want to go into new processes. You also have to consider the challenges of the estates in terms of the age and the tall trees, and in terms of labor, if in fact that's an issue.
But Dr. Green, do you think that I know there are varieties that are more resistant to some of the diseases, with the other diseases that have not impacted on our sort of our production here in Saint Lucia? Do you think that we can have, with the new planting, the new plant breeds, that we can get to be replanted in our country?
Well, there are certainly some varieties which are less susceptible to some of the major diseases that are threatening the whole industry in the region. And fortunately in the Malayan dwarf you have a variety that is known to be less susceptible to lethal yellowing disease. So to that extent you are prepared. Now your existing tall varieties, the traditional variety that's been used for copra, would certainly be highly susceptible to lethal yellowing. And I think it is wise to plan for the possible risk that lethal yellowing could arrive by considering introducing different varieties that will have less susceptibility to that disease.
So you're saying that we should, in addition to what we have here in St. Lucia, don't forget we have other diseases out there, so we have to be careful what varieties we bring in St. Lucia. How in terms of the plant quarantine, how does that work out?
Well, there are well-established procedures for ensuring that diseases are not brought in with new varieties, but it's important that the government is involved and the government authorities are involved in regulating the introduction not just of coconut but also ornamental palms, because we strongly suspect that there are cases in the Caribbean where disease has been brought in by unregulated and unauthorized introductions of coconut and other palm materials. So that's something that really has to be closely watched, and the regulatory authorities will have to keep a close check on the importation of palm materials.
So in your opinion, where do you expect to get our clean seed material from? What countries you figure that we can get?
Well, I think we have to start by taking stock of what is already here, what is available in the region, and what the risks are in the other countries where you can easily obtain material from. But there are procedures which will avoid those risks, such as plant tissue culture. Coconuts can be brought in tissue culture in glass tubes, and we've been quite impressed by the facilities you have here that could potentially handle that.
You are watching Agriculture on the Move. We are due for a break. We are going to be right back.
Agriculture, one of the pillars of St. Lucia's economic development, creating opportunities for earning a living for the farmer and his family. From the field to the kitchen, the St. Lucians are finding creative ways of using fruits, crops, and vegetables grown locally, from local seasonings to special brews, from aquaculture to the cultivation of local herbs for export. A strong agriculture industry strengthens the economy. The country needs your support, so buy local.
Welcome back to the program, Agriculture on the Move, and we are discussing the coconut industry in St. Lucia and, of course, the resuscitation of that industry. We have two gentlemen here with us. Dr. Singh, in terms of the other derivatives, apart from the oils and the water coconut industry, which has picked up over the years, do you think the water industry and the oil industry, they can cohabit?
Yeah, for the water industry, it is best to have varieties that are best suited to it. So you have the dwarf varieties, better yielding water and easier to harvest. And alongside that, depending on your business model and the demand for oil products, you could also have the tall varieties that are high yielding in terms of oil. One of the limitations, of course, is with the tall varieties is the fact that you need to have the wherewithal to be able to climb the trees and harvest the nuts. When the trees get too tall, you have the problem of harvesting. But there's a demand for both products. In fact, while we have seen very good demand for the water in the region, because of the new information about the nutritive value, therapeutic value of coconut oil, it makes sense to go in that. And quite apart from that, Caribbean people have traditionally used a lot of coconut oil in various processes, cooking and what have you.
The other derivatives, I notice we can also do things like peat moss, etc. How do you see those other derivatives playing a major role in the industry?
Well, those are other value addeds are well developed in the Far East. In our case, while there is potential for developing products out of those, the economies would require you to have the volume of coconut shells in one place to be able to make the processing economical. So to the extent that you may have processing at particular location of large volumes, that may give you the raw material to go into the fibers and to go into the peat and what have you.
Dr. Green, in terms of the pure stand establishment of coconuts, from look at it from an economic point of view, I know that probably falls in Dr. Singh's lap, but anyone of you can answer. Do you think we should go back into pure stand? Because before we had bananas, planted with coconuts, and what used to happen when we fertilize the bananas, the coconuts used to get a bit of fertilizer. Now, since the bananas has diminished so tremendously, the coconuts are not getting that sort of nutrients anymore. So, how you think we should go at this point if we intend to resuscitate that industry?
Yes, well, I think that's a very good question. It's one that I think that the farmers are answering for themselves. We've observed in many cases farmers who are going back into coconuts are underplanting or interplanting with short-term crops to give them a short-term income, to tide them over the period of 3 to 4 years before they get any return on their investment. And that's undoubtedly a model that will have to be followed and researched. And I think the farmers need to be encouraged to adopt different options, experiment with different crops according to their own particular conditions and their own particular abilities, and of course labour availability, which is an increasing problem not just in Saint Lucia but throughout much of the Caribbean region.
In the other islands, are there similarities in terms of the challenges?
Yes, certainly. I think if you take the last point, coconut takes a number of years to establish. So it means you have the establishment cost and you have the maintenance cost until production comes. Small farmers do not have that kind of cash to do that. And so more and more we are seeing intercropping and mixed farming.
That's correct.
Right? Now, just today we spoke with one farmer who is intercropping coconut with fruit trees. And it depends what terrain you doing your coconut farming on. On the steep terrain, you want to have tree crops and whatnot to protect these slopes. In the flatter areas, you could have things like plantain and other short crops. But the intercropping, particularly with short crops in the early years, is very critical for cash flow. And if a farmer does not see his way clear in terms of having the cash flow to sustain his livelihood, it is very unlikely that he may not go into that. So encouraging intercropping or mixed farming is very, very important.
In Saint Lucia, in terms of acreage, we have a number of small acreages. Okay, economically, what sort of acreage? Say, for example, a farmer has a 5-acre plot, and of course he is into diversification. What is the economic point that he can plant, say, the number of trees to give him that economic return?
Well, if you have 2 coconut trees, right, or 1 coconut tree, you get an average of 1 bunch per month.
Okay.
If you sell those to the vendors or whatever, it is cash income.
Okay.
And one of the things that farmers point out is that once a coconut tree is established, the maintenance is relatively little. All right? So I think that rather than looking at coconut in terms of its viability on its own, it is the viability of coconut intercrop with other crops. Right? And the fact that while your other crops may require significant amount of ongoing inputs, coconut is very hardy and subject to pest and disease. You could get a continuous production for a long time. So what the economics is really what you want to do. If you want to get into oil, right, and you want to depend solely on your production, you would want to determine how much nuts you require for the market that you're aiming for. So if you're selling in your own community, then maybe 4 or 5 acres of coconut would be fine. If it's for the water nut, then every tree that you plant is income, right? So I think the economics has to be worked out in the context of the farming system.
Okay. Okay. Well, we are due for a break. We're moving fast and furious. We are watching Agriculture on the Move. We'll be right back.
Did you know that government provides duty-free incentives on farm machinery, inputs, irrigation systems, boat engines, boats, and many more? Investing in agriculture, a wise choice.
Welcome back to the program, Agriculture on the Move. Dr. Green, in terms of the agronomic practices of the crop at this point in time, since we're hoping to resuscitate the crop, the old farmers are already almost gone, and you have new farmers coming on stream. Do you think now, in terms of the way forward, our practices should be well entrenched in the system? In other words, how do we go out there and educate those young farmers the way forward for the production of coconuts now?
Yes, I think there's clearly a need for information to pass down through the generations, but also there has to be a change in the way in which coconuts are grown. The dwarf coconuts are generally thought to be more demanding in terms of nutrients, so there will probably be an additional requirement to ensure they're kept well fertilized and maintained. it's no longer going to be the sort of planted and harvest when you retire crop that perhaps it used to be. But to counter that, of course, the value of the dwarf nuts for water is a lot higher than the value used to be for copra. So there's going to be more income driving this process. And I think we have to provide particularly the younger farmers with the technical and the economic assessments of the benefits that they can reap from growing coconuts in a scientific way.
What you got out there with your visits in terms of the disease establishment in Saint Lucia? I mean, did you see a lot of, for example, of the lethal yellowing? Did you see a lot of the mite, the coconut mite?
No, as I said before, I think that Saint Lucia is blessed with being relatively pest and disease free. Now you do have the red palm mite, which many of your audience will be aware of, and that is certainly causing damage to all of the palms we've seen. Pretty much are infested. There does seem to be some evidence that certain types are less susceptible than others, so hopefully we can encourage farmers to adopt certain varieties that will suffer less damage to red palm mite than others. And fortunately, some of the dwarf types which are favoured for coconut water do seem to be less susceptible to this particular pest. Now, aside from that, St Lucia is certainly free of lethal yellowing. At the moment, the whole region, this part of the Caribbean, is free of lethal yellowing, although, as you may be aware, the disease has recently arrived in Antigua. So it's not too far away, and there is really a need for vigilance to ensure that disease doesn't arrive, and should it creep in, that it's stamped on as quickly as possible.
Dr. Singh, what's the way forward?
Taking from that last point, agricultural crops being biological, you could have pest and disease any day. And if we are going to encourage investors into agriculture, we need to give them the assurance that we have the capacity to help them manage pest and disease. In the case of coconut, there are pest and disease all around us. So while you may be saddled now primarily with the mite and the red palm mite, it's very important to build capacity within the institutions that have the capacity, have the ability to do it. So our project is really to propose interventions that could provide the support for the development of the industry. And one area is really, one area that we are in fact thinking of is to provide short-term training for scientists, or extensionists and whatnot, to go to centers of excellence in coconut research, so that they get exposed, say the short term, 2 or 3 months, whatever, and get exposed to the research going on, but also establish linkages, so that if you have a problem and you can't resolve it, you know where to go. So you have, for example, Mexico does excellent work in coconut, Embrapa in Brazil, and even Jamaica has been, the coconut board has been doing work for a long time. So that kind of exchange would be. So one area is really capacity building in crop protection, right? The other area is really, while we see growth in the coconut water market, there are some problems with the processed coconut water. Limited shelf life, in some cases the quality deteriorates, and in some cases, for example, in some of the countries, the tests have shown high bacterial count. Today we have to be very concerned about food safety, and therefore one of the areas we are looking at again is some kind of development work to improve the processes, so that you could end up with a coconut water that's fairly natural, has some shelf life, and meet the standards in terms of food safety. Many investors, for example, in some of the countries are aiming for the North American and European market, because now coconut is being touted as probably even better than the health drinks, than the sports drinks. However, based on our assessment, the products here wouldn't make the test in terms of meeting the requirements for it. So what we need to do is to develop the process and to develop the processing system, so that you could have a product that is reasonably close to the natural and has a reasonable shelf life and meet the standards of food safety. A similar project has to be done with the oil because in some of these places it's been done in backyard with livestock there and whatnot, and although only producing maybe 20 liters or 10 liters or what, it is very important part of their income. If we are going to then move from that to get into the regular market or even the export market as virgin coconut oil, regardless of how good we feel it is, if it doesn't meet the standards, it would in fact not go. So to the extent that many people in the region are looking at producing virgin coconut oil or tapping into the new demand for coconut oil, I think it's important for us to work with small scale processors in terms of their process technique, processing environment and what. So one of the things that we are doing on this project is speaking to institutions that have the capacity to make contribution to technology, so that we are going to make that proposal, and hopefully these institutions could get funding to do some development that could benefit the entire region.
Final words from you, sir, Dr. Green?
Yes, I agree. I don't really have very much to say with that. I think that the key issue for development is going to be quality assurance, both for the local and, of course, the export market. And that's going to require access to information and development of some new technology, and, of course, a certain amount of regulation.
Well, I want to thank you all for being here, gentlemen. Dr. Simon Ed Green, who is an agronomist and also has responsibility for plant health, and also Dr. Singh, who is an agricultural economist. I want to thank you for being on the program. Thank you for coming to Saint Lucia and giving us that kind of assistance, and hope everything goes well as planned. People, you're watching Agriculture on the Move. I want to thank you for viewing. Of course, agriculture is on the move, and of course, the coconut industry will be on the move shortly. So, I am Phillip Sydney saying goodbye and tune in again.
Agriculture on the move.
Agricole mouvement.
Agriculture on the move.
Agricole en mouvement.
Agriculture on the move.
Agricole mouvement.
Agriculture on the move.
Agricole en mouvement.